liquefied and exited out of the glowing hole. After several more seconds of frenzied activity, the zombie's movements began to slow. The massive tissue damage had taken its toll, but, remarkably, the creature did not expire. The acid, for all its destructive power, had not reached the brainstem where the virus maintained its strongest hold. The zombie collapsed to the floor. Though immobile, it was far from inactive. Spasmodic tremors ran through what remained of its musculature. Its limbs twitched and jerked in erratic patterns, driven by the relentless viral impulses still coursing through its neural pathways. David observed the scene with rapt attention. The zombie lay somewhat quiet on the floor, its convulsions gradually becoming less frequent. Nearby, the two halves of the facehugger also rested motionless, their acidic blood pooling harmlessly on the enclosure's floor. The surface, composed of the same nanoceramic alloy infused with carbon nanotubes and graphene sheets as the walls, remained impervious to the corrosive effects of the xenomorph's blood. After several minutes of silent observation, David addressed the lab's AI. Fascinating results, but clearly not the outcome we were seeking. It appears we'll need to take a different approach. David finished. The AI responded promptly, "Agreed. What parameters would you like to adjust for the next trial?" David's expression remained neutral, his synthetic features betraying no emotion as he responded. "We'll bypass the facehugger entirely. Prepare a restrained zombie specimen. I'll surgically introduce the xenomorph embryo directly into its chest cavity." "Understood," the AI acknowledged. "Subject ZB009, another outbreak victim, is being prepped and placed into a biological intervention apparatus as we speak. The specimen will be ready for the procedure in approximately 20 minutes. "Excellent," David replied. He then made his way through the ship's corridors to a highly secure area designated for cryogenic organic storage. After inputting a security sequence, David accessed a sealed compartment containing carefully preserved xenomorph eggs. Selecting one, he removed the frost-covered egg from its cryochamber and placed it in a portable containment unit. With his precious cargo secured, David proceeded to the surgical laboratory located in another section of the ship. Upon entering the lab, David approached the XM5000, an advanced surgical unit designed for operations on extraterrestrial organisms. Its components were crafted from a cutting-edge ceramic metallic composite infused with nanoscale neutralizing agents, capable of withstanding even the most corrosive biological substances known to science. David carefully transferred the egg from the portable unit to the XM5000's main chamber. He initiated the machine's environmental controls, setting the internal temperature to just above freezing, cold enough to keep the egg in a state of suspended animation, yet warm enough to allow for precise surgical manipulation. As the chamber sealed, David began the procedure. Robotic arms, responding to his expert commands, delicately peeled back the egg's layers. Using micro-incision tools, David navigated the facehugger's dormant form with exquisite care. He located the embryo sac and extracted the tiny xenomorph embryo. The entire process took just under 15 minutes, the egg remaining inert throughout. David placed the embryo in a cryogenic stasis unit, then sealed it within a reinforced containment vessel. With the extracted parasite secured, he began making his way to the biological intervention apparatus where ZB009 awaited, ready to serve as the host for this unprecedented xenobiological experiment. ZB009, a fully infected male in his late 50s, lay restrained on the horizontal table within the Nexus 7. The Nexus 7 was designed to contain and manipulate even the most dangerous and corrosive biological entities. Its frame was constructed from a hybrid alloy of titanium, tungsten, and carbon nanotubes, providing unparalleled strength and resistance to both physical force and chemical corrosion. The surface was coated with a layer of synthetic diamond, further enhancing its durability and acid resistance. Swarms of nanobots hovered above the restrained zombie, capable of instantly forming into any required surgical tool or additional restraint. ZB009's chest was exposed and marked for the impending procedure. Multiple restraints, formed from the same acid-resistant alloy as the machine's frame, held the subject immobile at key points along its body. The zombie thrashed against these restraints with inhuman strength, but they held firm. Above the zombie, an array of tools hovered, ready for use. These were temporary formations of the nanobots, poised to transform into whatever implement David might require during the procedure. The Nexus 7 housed an advanced onboard AI, capable of performing complex surgical procedures autonomously. However, David opted for manual control, preferring to guide the process himself through a set of remote controls. David had to rely on these remote controls because the Nexus 7, while incredibly advanced, was designed primarily for human operators. As such, it lacked a direct neural interface that would have allowed an android like David to connect directly and operate the machinery effortlessly. As a result, David had to rely on a more primitive and slower data transfer method, manual controls. David initiated the surgical procedure by guiding the nanobots to form into a precise scalpel. With meticulous care, he made an incision in the zombie's chest cavity, large enough to accommodate the xenomorph embryo. The zombie's thrashing intensified, but the restraints held firm. David then directed the nanobots to create a specialized insertion tool, using it to carefully place the embryo within the host body. Once the embryo was in place, David utilized the Nexus 7's advanced suturing capabilities to close the incision, leaving barely a trace of the invasive procedure. The entire Nexus 7 apparatus, along with the restrained zombie, was housed within a large containment chamber. This chamber was nearly identical to the one that had contained subject CB-008 earlier, featuring the same 20-inch thick walls made of acid-resistant nanoceramic alloy. The chamber's dimensions were approximately 15 feet by 15 feet, providing ample space for the Nexus 7 and allowing room for any potential containment measures that might be necessary. During the operation, David had been seated at a control station directly outside the chamber. A complex array of holographic interfaces and tactile controls allowed him to manipulate the Nexus 7 with precision. With the surgical procedure complete, David rose from his seat and stepped away from the control panel. He moved to stand directly in front of the chamber's nano-display transparent wall, his tall frame mere inches from the barrier. The advanced display technology made it appear as though nothing separated him from the contents of the chamber. For hours, David remained in this position, completely motionless. His synthetic eyes, designed to operate without the need for blinking, stayed fixed on the restrained zombie within the Nexus 7. The only movement in the room came from the data readouts, flickering across the nano displays, providing a constant stream of information about the parasite's development. As time passed, the zombie's convulsions grew more violent. Suddenly, the AI's voice broke the silence. Parasite emergence imminent. Estimated time to exit, 30 seconds. David's posture straightened almost imperceptibly. Magnify view on the host, he commanded. The nano display immediately zoomed in, providing a clear, close-up image of the zombie's heaving chest. Release the containment tube around the Nexus 7, David ordered next. With a soft hiss, the additional protective barrier around the surgical apparatus retracted into the chamber floor. Finally, David gave his last command, disengage all restraints on the host. As the Nexus 7's holding clamps released, the zombie's thrashing reached a fever pitch. It immediately jerked forward, tearing itself off the machine. In a violent flurry of motion, it lunged at David. Over and over, the creature hurled itself against the transparent barrier, its decayed fists slamming into the unyielding material with relentless force. David, standing motionless, didn't flinch. Then, without warning, the zombie stopped mid-lunge. It froze. The primal instinct to attack David faltered as something else took precedence. Its gaze shifted down to its chest, where the skin began to twitch and ripple unnaturally. The creature let out a low, furious growl and started clawing at its own torso. And then it happened. The zombie let out a horrific guttural scream as its chest exploded outward. From the gaping wound emerged the chest burster. It was about a foot tall, unnaturally thin, but writhing with savage energy. Its skin had a mottled, sickly hue, resembling the necrotic tissue of its host, and its metallic teeth gleamed under the chamber's sterile lights. The sound it made as it screeched was ear-piercing, a high-pitched, keening wail that echoed in the sealed room. David watched, utterly fascinated, but before David could make any further observations, the zombie, still functional despite the gaping hole in his chest, reached up with a grotesque display of speed and grabbed the chest burster by its tail. The creature let out a piercing shriek, twisting and writhing, but the zombie didn't hesitate. It bit down on the chest burster, its jaw tearing into the xenomorph hybrid's body. The hiss of acidic blood filled the air, and the zombie's face began to melt under the corrosive onslaught. But the zombie, driven by its unstoppable rage, continued its assault. The chest burster, in a fit of primal survival instinct, twisted and lunged, its razor-sharp metallic teeth sinking into the zombie's hand. But even as the creature fought back, the zombie's free hand clamped down with inhuman strength on the chest burster's head, holding it in a death grip. With one final violent motion, the zombie bit down into the chestburster's head, its jaw clamping shut with a wet, sickening crunch. The chestburster let out a shrill, agonized scream as its skull collapsed under the force, its body going limp in the zombie's grasp. David observed, his expression neutral, as the zombie continued to devour the chestburster, tearing into its body with reckless abandon. The acid continued to melt away the zombie's flesh, eating through its face, neck, and torso with every bite. The zombie's head became a corroded mess, barely recognizable, yet it persisted, pulling more of the chestburster into its mouth. Finally, the zombie's body could take no more. With a final convulsion, its mutilated form collapsed onto the floor. The half-eaten remains of the chestburster spilled from the gaping wound in the zombie's chest, dripping through the cavity in its decimated torso and pooling on the floor. The acid hissed and fizzled as it continued to eat away at the remains. Interesting, David said with a blank expression. Soon enough, David repeated the process, but this time kept the zombie restrained as the chestburster emerged. David's eyes tracked the chestburster as it skittered across the polished floor. The creature's skin bore an unsettling resemblance to the flesh of its zombie host. Its small head swiveled rapidly, assessing its sterile surroundings with predatory acuity. "Commence growth protocol," David commanded. A panel in the chamber's wall slid open, revealing a chute. Through it tumbled a mass of raw synthetic protein matter, a specially formulated organic compound designed to accelerate xenomorph growth. The chestburster, driven by instinct and ravenous hunger, darted towards the heap. It tore into the mass with ferocious intensity, its metallic teeth easily shredding the dense material. As it fed, David observed minute changes occurring in real time. The creature's exoskeleton began to darken, taking on a glossy sheen, reminiscent